Welcome to this podcast titled The African Dilemma. I am Nathan Kiwere, your host. I'm a writer and a publisher, and today I'm joined by a friend, colleague, Mr. Kagonyera Lennon.
Good to be here.
Lennon is an engineer, civil engineer to be specific, and is also passionate about farming and the arts. And so today we have an exciting topic about Africa. We've been looking about the continent and thinking about what's going on, historical perspectives. But there's one particular thing that has intrigued us, and this is about the designation of Africa as a dark continent.
Yes, sir.
The dark continent.
Piece of history.
Yes, this is history. 20 in our primary school. And why I find it intriguing personally is because Africa is the only designation of a dark continent. So we want to find out why in the whole world, you know. And the fact that the people who designated Africa as a dark continent are not Africans themselves, but people who did not know about this continent, and instead of finding out about the continent, they wrote about it as a dark continent. And then they taught us that our continent
is a dark
continent. And Africans are teaching fellow Africans
that we are the dark continent.
The dark continent.
Man.
I think that is not right.
That's not right. In all
right.
ethical forms, it's not right. As in, how are these guys not taken to the ICC for calling us a dark continent? As in, this is like a piece of human rights in every sense of the word. As in, it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
But they had their reasons.
They had their reasons, and you can't blame them fully. I think from that perspective, you can say a few things, but really, their motive can't be that they didn't know much about us. It's too convenient. It's too convenient.
But remember, this is 19th century.
Yeah.
A group of guys comes to Africa, 19th century, and they have somewhere explorers.
Yeah.
What do explorers do?
They explore. They explore. They try to look for a few things. Look for some fame. Try to get their name to something. I think that's what explorers really do.
They do it for fun. They're tourists. Are they tourists in
professional tourists?
Professional tourists.
Professional tourists.
Okay.
In a sense.
But their work is to get information about a place and maybe write about it and tell those who don't know about it. So during that time, I think exploration was a big thing.
Big business.
Big business, to be specific.
Big business.
So these guys were actually benefiting from this.
Yes.
How?
I think that the idea was to get funding for your expedition, and the funding was based on the premise that there was hope that you could get something in return for your journey back. So the whole reason for these people going on all these expeditions was to try and get something valuable that you could come back and resell and pay back your investors, and also you keep a profit for yourself. So it was a profitable business for them, and at the time it must have been very profitable.
I assume it must have been dangerous as well. You know?
Very. I don't know how many people came back, and for me, you kind of wonder who in this mindset, which investor would you go to right now? The only person you'd go to for such a thing would be Elon Musk, who's going to Mars for some reason. When we're thinking we can still save Earth.
And have they designated Mars as a dark planet?
Thank you. Why is it
How much do
a
you know
dark planet?
about Mars?
Nothing. The thing I know about Mars is that, and for some, I don't even think I know if it from my book, but it's always depicted as some kind of red planet. Planet. Maybe they'll call it the red planet, the red continent, not the dark continent. But the dark continent thing is always also interesting because if you're looking at it, Asia, Australia are all continents that I don't think these people knew anything about. If you look at it, if you look at the interior, if you look at how Asia is, if you believe National Geographic, it's jungle, it's humid, lots of rivers, dangerous rivers, lots of dangerous wild animals, lots of big snakes, lots of malaria. So you're thinking of it, you're looking at a continent that had an interior that was difficult to get into. Asia must have been more difficult than Africa. Australia, I don't know the history of Australia back then, but must have been a desert as well. So one is a desert, so inhospitable. The other one is just difficult. I think if you're looking at Africa, Africa must have been the easiest of the three to get into. So you can't say that you're going to call Africa the dark continent simply because you have no information about it. I don't think that's right.
But I think the other problem in that kind of designation is generalization. When you say Africa is a dark continent, that's a sweeping statement.
Very sweeping statement.
You're talking about Africa from Egypt to the tip of South Africa, which is not entirely true, because for centuries, Europe was doing trade with Europe and Asia.
Yes.
Were doing trade with Africa.
Yes.
Taking minerals and slaves and all that stuff.
Yes.
Only to come of all times in the 19th century, and they say now this is a dark continent.
A dark continent. And it's interesting because if you look at history, you look at guys like, if you look at things, the amazing things, Egypt being the cradle of civilization, the fountain of knowledge in the library of Alexandria. If you look at the Romans having fought great wars with Carthage, Hannibal being one of, actually considered to be the greatest general tactician, military tactician of his time, maybe even of all time, because he actually took the war to the Romans. He actually crossed the Alps and fought the Romans on their own soil, which for a long time the Romans always had the thought that the Alps were their great wall, great wall to keep the enemy out. He found a way through, and he took the war to them, and Hannibal, although he's depicted as in some stories as a white man, he was actually known. It's known that he's actually a black man. So the black people who were known, they were known to be great fighters. Rome is known to have a history of having black Caesars. So for me, the question has always been: so the dark continent. If these people are going to call us a dark continent because of our origins, of the continent being the dark people, that makes sense for me. And for me, there's nothing wrong with someone calling me dark, because I am dark.
Yeah.
I am dark. So I'm not going to refute anything. It's not racist to call me dark. I am dark. It's a fact. Yeah. That's like how a black man might call a dark person might call a white man pale.
Yeah.
Or very, 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 very light. Yeah. So for me, those are not issues of racism or anything of that sort.
But let's find out why they call it the dark continent in the first place. Because the thing is, to date, there are people in the Western world who still think Africa is a dark continent, because the kind of narrative that they have learned about this continent is very slanted.
It is.
The extent that some people in the West think Africa is a country.
They still think we're running away from lions. Well, we have to run away from lions and what animals.
It's very strange.
It's very strange.
Ignorance.
It's
total ignorance people have.
But I think for them, you have to understand that they live in a world where the information is skewed to their life. So if you live in Europe, if you live in a particular country, you're going to know about your own country. I think we're the only ones who are trying to figure out what other people are doing with their lives in their other people's country, rather than figuring out what we need, what we are living in our own country. So the problem, I think, isn't theirs; it's ours.
How is that our problem? Come on.
Look at it this way: we how much do we even know about our own country? How we have about how many districts? Maybe now how many? 107 or something. So what are all these districts? How many of us have gone through our own country? At least from east to west, south.
But what has that got to do with?
The thing is this: why would we study about someone else rather than your own country? If you're going to live here in your own country, why bother thinking about someone else? Why are we studying the history of the Argentinians, of
Europe,
of
especially
Europe,
in the syllabus,
of the Americas?
you know?
It's really
But
rubbish.
I'm
It's
not
really
sure. I'm not
rubbish.
sure I would call it rubbish because knowledge. I mean, knowledge for knowledge's sake is fine. The problem is if you don't teach about your own knowledge. You know,
That's the
your own
biggest part.
You know, look, I had a stint teaching at the university at
Yes.
Makerere. History of art.
Yes,
And
yes.
the whole history of art
Is European
was about
art.
European art. There was nothing about history of Ugandan art.
That's the
And I thought
challenge.
this was wrong. That was completely wrong. So what that means is you bring out students who are very competent, skilled in European art
Yeah.
at the expense of their own art.
I think for me that's why you get companies like yours, like me, like CC Analytica that's supposed to kind of bring the perspective of Africa from Africans. The thing is that the reality is the interior of Africa is still unknown, even to some of us. That's the fact. The interior of Africa is hard to get to. Some of the facts that for me that some of the things that clogged us from back in the day are still clogging us right now. We still can't get into our transport into the interior is still hard. Unlike Europe, because like Europeans, you have water bodies that connect all the way to the seas. So you have interior transport that gets you quite cheaply to a port, to a coastline. We don't have those. We don't have enough of those water bodies, and then we have no infrastructure going into the interior. But maybe the only thing that helps us the fact that maybe we don't have great jungles and undiscovered places.
Oh, we do. I mean,
You
Congo,
think we do?
Congo.
Yeah, I think the Congo.
And you
I think
again,
that-
you're speaking like those people.
Yes,
You're
yes,
being,
yes. I can agree with that. Yeah. It's true.
When you talk of Africa not having infrastructure to penetrate the interior, I think you're really being generalistic. But because I know for sure there are African countries that have tried, But
Which ones
Congo,
tried?
I mean Congo,
Which ones
South
have tried?
Africa.
South Africa has tried,
North
but
Africa.
South Africa has tried to an extent whereby you wonder how far it can go. I think to a general extent I can accept that, but it's not quite as blatantly.
There are people in Congo, DR Congo, who have never crossed to another province.
Yes.
For a lifetime.
Yes.
Someone is born in Kinshasa, someone is born in Goma, and the only form of transport is by air.
By air.
Yes, so they have several airports, but how many people can actually afford to travel by air? So you are born in a place and you live and die in that place without knowing what goes on in the rest of the world.
I think we have several challenges as a people. We definitely have several challenges as a people. For me, connectivity is one of the biggest challenges. Us connecting to our fellow Africans. I think the AFCTA, African Free Trade Continental Area, is that treaty should help us with a lot of the terms of at least duties and all that. But the main thing for me is that if I can find out that there is a demand for my products by my neighbors, why would I be bothering taking my products to the Europeans? I remember listening to one in-law of mine who told me that to not try and waste time looking beyond Africa for my goods. Look for my fellow Africans, because the standards that they have are almost like a form of protectionism for them.
Oh.
So it helps to keep some goods out, or keep some countries out. So for me, I am more interested in my African people, what we need, because now for me, I feel like every time we're doing anything with Europeans, it's not essential. But every time I'm dealing with Africans, everything we do is essential. It seems like it's really fundamental, very really basic.
Okay. Then I want to draw you back to the Dark Continent.
Yes.
So we were talking about how Europeans came
Mm-hmm.
and they had interest in Africa as a continent for,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
various reasons, right? So they come and a few of them succeed to penetrate the interior of the so-called dark continent,
Mm-hmm.
and they write about it.
Yes.
Their experiences, of course, as you say, these were explorers
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who had a business mind to it. They wanted to be famous, they wanted to make money out of it, so they were doing a job.
They're doing a
So
job.
they wrote about Africa,
Mm.
and this information was picked by their fellow, their countrymen and women back home, and that is what informed their narrative, what they know about Africa, you know,
Yes.
and which I think is kind of problematic in the sense that you have this person who has come in on this continent
Mm-hmm.
for a few months, even years, and then they form an opinion that is going to become the creed, the all they know.
Yes.
And because Africans that time were not literate, you know, we had to just accept.
Yes.
Yes, to be, and that some of that information is what people still know
Up to now.
up to now, and also because not many Africans have written about their story. So these guys were writing about not the history of Africa, but the history of their activities in Africa.
Africa.
It's like when I go to Europe and then I come back and write a book about my journey, my travels.
Yes.
You know, how can I claim that to represent, the people?
But the question I think for me you have to ask yourself here is again, why would someone talk about your continent? Why would I go and write about the history of America or of Europe as an African? I think for me that's more of the very interesting part. Why would I go and why would a foreigner come to write about my history? What's the motive for me? It's always a bigger one. It's always a bigger thing for me if you're looking at that whole thing. Why did they write about us, by the way? You think about it. Why they? Because I imagine. I don't think I've done a lot about. I've done about Asia. Do they write a bit about Asia as well?
I guess they did.
They must have. But why? Why would they
I
go
mean,
and write
I'm
about
not
it?
sure. That's a really difficult question to answer. I mean, why not? The question is why not? I mean, if some of them succeeded to break into this, that I've read some books, by the way, about by some. There's a missionary, Uganda, a British missionary that came to Uganda. It's called John. Now I forget the other name.
Yes.
But he actually wrote some really interesting, very detailed information about the Baganda. The book is called The Baganda.
Yes.
John Roscoe.
John
Roscoe, 1911.
Yes.
It's a big volume that way, and it was published then.
Yes.
And unfortunately, those books are not available in this country.
Yeah.
If you want to get a copy, you have to go to Britain, to London,
Wow.
or to other cities.
Wow.
And so if you ask me why, I think they were, to his credit, were able to capture some information. Whether it is completely true or half true, that is a different matter. That's a matter of debate. But for them to have actually covered that much, for me, I think is to their credit.
It is the credit, but for me, you're going to look at it and wonder. So this guy John Roscoe goes and writes his books. I don't know if he actually made a lot of money from his books. So who was he targeting? Who was his target audience? I think for me the thing that for me I can appreciate about the Europeans is their propensity to write. They have a propensity to write about anything. I think if you told them to write about carpets, I'm sure there are very many books about carpets and how they are made and which regions they have. So the question is if those people are saying that this was a dark continent, so where did that guy get that information from? So that he was observing. I don't think he can get all that information by just observation. So he must have had a source of that information. So if that information was there, then what were the sources that were there? How did he get it? and then the thing is that there must have been a method that was used for them for people to actually pass this information on through the timelines, through the generations. So for me, I think when these people come and claim that we're a dark continent, that the knowledge was not there. The knowledge was there. We had our system of doing things. We might have been backward in their eyes, and maybe rightly so. I'm not going to deny that part fully. However, we had a way of doing things that was effective for us, and we were not suffering. People think that I don't think. Actually, I've never seen it written that we were a country that was in poverty, that we had famine, we had hunger.
No, not at
We
all.
were not in chaos. We're not in.
People had enough.
People had enough. People were living comfortably. People had an organized way of community. So we had kingdoms, we had chiefdoms. So yes, we had wars, but that was. But also the Europeans had wars in that time when they had kingdoms.
Absolutely.
So that's nothing new. So we were quite frankly all right. So if we were all right, then it means that there's a way that they, and for me I think the problem that we have with Europeans is the narrative that they created, where they made us look like we were in trouble. They could have come, but I think their method of working could have been a bit different. They could have come and, of course, they had the three C's. The the Christianization of Africa. They have civilization and commerce. I think they could have achieved all three without